In this video, I will show you how I'm farming my gold in the Mist of Pandaria pre-patch. And all of these methods will be raw gold farming, and there's going to be a ton of different ones. But you can easily make a lot of additional gold if you're also going to use the auction house, as we will be finding many different professional materials which are selling super quickly at the moment. The first location I would like to highlight is the raid Karazhan from Burning Crusade. This is a 10-man raid, but it's gonna be important that you're not slaying any bosses, or you will end up being saved and not able to reset this raid. The first thing I do is always to run to the right and enter this room, and then I will be pulling as many creatures as possible. If there's going to be a boss at this location, then remember not to pull this one, but you would like to pull as many as possible until you get to this location where I'm currently at. Depending on your gear, then you might also be required to use some defensive cooldowns, else you just blast through these and loot everything. If you have skinning, you will also make additional gold, simply because you can skin most of these creatures. Once you're done with this, you would also like to move to the next location. Pull all the remaining targets you forgot to, and run to the next room. Here you won't really benefit from having skinning, as we won't be able to skin any of these, but it will be a rather massive pull. You could always divide it into two if your gear isn't that great. On this character my gear is honestly not even great. I'm mainly looking for raid gear, and of course also a couple of epics from normal raids. A small trick, because some of these creatures are also casters, then what you could be doing is simply to line of sight behind a wall. This will force them to get to your destination instead of standing at range and shooting at you, making this farm even better. And if you feel like this clip is way too quick, then you could always just put in some music, mute the video and set the speed to 0.5. The next pull I do is divided into two, but you could do it in one if you're also having many cooldowns and decent gear. If you have decent gear, then you pull everything up here, you jump down and pull everything in this room. If your gear isn't that great, well then you just do what I do right here and wait for the creatures to come back down. Once you feel like this is safe enough, well then you could pull the remaining enemies, or if you feel safe enough, you could also pull the next room right in there. This could be one massive pull, but it also requires cooldowns and some proper gear, else you'll probably end up dying at some point. Then we run back up and pull what we didn't manage to pull the first time, and we run into this opera room. Here there's also going to be quite a few creatures, and these we then stack together and finish them off. At this point, we're pretty much also halfway through this farm, and now we'll need to go back and jump down to the location where there's also a ton of creatures. If you had insane gear, you could have done this pull when you were also doing the first jump, but this will require you to have such insane gear because you will be taking a lot of additional damage when you pull this many. What you would also like to be aware of when you move into this room is that these enemies will also start to stun you, so you can't pull too many here or you will end up dying because you're taking too much damage when you're being stunned. So finish these off before you move to the next room. Here you would like to pull as much as possible, but don't move down the stairs yet. It's way better just to finish them off like this, at least if your gear isn't too great. Once you've finished them off, you can then move down the stairs and pull as much as possible down here. Yeah, you don't really need just to kill a few here, I'm just showing you an example, because we can easily pull the remaining part of the raid and drag this back all the way to the entrance, or we'll exit and then finish them off. I know my gold per hour is not exactly 2000, but I've also separated this into way more pulls than I needed to, basically because it also allows people with green gear or well fresh level 85 to do what I just did. But with better gear you can that way also do bigger pulls and reduce the time you need to spend in this raid, and that way also increase the gold you make every single hour. Don't forget, I also spent quite a bit of time skinning all the creatures after the first pull. This will also reduce the gold you make if you're of course not selling it on the auction house. If you sell all of this on the auction house, you can probably expect another 500 gold every single hour. In Northrend there's a dungeon called Ahn'kahet, and close to this there's another one called Ahn'kahet, or however we pronounce this. I honestly like this dungeon quite a bit, and in the first pull I'm pulling as much as possible and dragging this to the first boss room. This will line of sight everything so I can stack them together and finish them off. As you get to the first boss, you can always just go ham on this and try to finish it off, basically because you will need to wait for all the creatures to get to your location anyway. For those of you with skinning, it would honestly be worth if you skin all of these creatures, but for the sake of this video and the raw gold making, then I'm not going to skin everything. Instead, I'll be moving on with the next pull. What will be important is that you make sure you're also clicking on the 2 objects. The first one being up here, the blue one. And then you move back down and you go to the next one on the other side, where there's going to be, another object you will need to click on. It's gonna be important that you're clicking on both of these, else you won't be able to go on in the dungeon. What I need to highlight as well is that if you have good gear, then you'll finish off this dungeon in next to no time. And at some point, you might also have to wait 5 to 10 minutes before you can continue farming the dungeon because of the dungeon cap, or well, how many dungeons you can do every single hour. However, in the pre-patch, there might also be a lot of things you need to prepare, or maybe even level up a monk. So as we're waiting for the dungeons to be ready, you could always log on to another character and level in the open world. Instead of killing these creatures here, you could also just drag them to the next boss location, as this will optimize the route even further. But it of course only matters if you have other things to be doing. To be fair, then I do prefer Karazhan over this dungeon, even though it's quick and it's also making me a lot of gold per hour. Then we gotta remember that you can easily make gold on the auction house. This is just raw gold making, but all the cloth and leather you get in Karazhan is so much additional gold, and we're also getting more green items we could disenchant and sell on the auction house. At this point, we are also at the final boss location. Here you wanna save your cooldowns and go ham so we can avoid the transition and simply finish this off even quicker. You can also finish off all the ads you just pulled, but mainly you wanna prioritize killing the boss and then finish off the ads. Once you've done this, you're ready to leave the dungeon, reset, and of course, go once more. Next up, a Burning Crusade dungeon called the Botanica, which is found in the Netherstorm at this location. Some of you has also pointed out that many of the original Cataclysm gold farms has been nerfed in the pre-patch. This is why I'm also making this updated version so I can confirm things are still working. And it definitely does in the Botanica. This is still a great dungeon. And what I like about dungeons is that you have no competition whatsoever. When you get to this area, or well, when I get to this area, I always go behind this wall and then I finish off these targets. There's a mechanic that after 1 minute allow all of these creatures to start stunning you. So if you do too big of a pull, you could also end up dying. And because you don't really need to rush this dungeon because of the dungeon cap, well, then you just want to take your time. You can of course do big pulls, but then again, you don't need to rush if you don't feel comfortable enough, or your gear sadly isn't great. I'm also curious about one thing. Would you like to see more of these videos in the future? I mean videos where I'm also speeding up the clip but doing voiceover, instead of voiceover and then maybe a 10 or 15 minutes dungeon or raid. I basically just want to make quick guides that can help people make gold, and of course also other useful Mist of Pandaria guides. This is why I try to speed up as much as possible, but I'm still curious about your opinion, so make sure to post a comment below the video so I also know what people would like to see in the future. And if you would like to see a part 2 as well, because I have a couple of other dungeons I would honestly like to share with you if there's a huge interest. At this point, we are also at the final boss room, and as of right now, I'm currently sitting close to 1600 gold an hour. This can of course be optimized if we're also getting good drops. In this case, I honestly got the items that were also selling for the lowest amount of gold. And once again, remember all cloth, materials and green items we could post on the auction house, as this will easily increase what we're also making. In the pre-patch, there are so many different ways to be making a lot of gold beside farming dungeons. And right now, professions, or well, grinding professions like mining, herbalism and skinning are great, especially because many people are boosting characters to 85 and they need to speed level their professions before Mist of Pandaria. So if you have gather professions, then you could also be doing this to make a ton of gold. You can also take advantage of this when you're going to level up your monk, and I would probably choose mining but also skinning. There's a lot of people leveling leatherworking as it's a great profession, but mining materials are always great because it's needed for engineering, blacksmithing, but also jewel crafting. If you would like to see more useful Mist of Pandaria videos, make sure to check out my channel or subscribe to get notified the next time I post a new video. In fact, there's more than 20 more videos coming out very soon.